enchanting land steeped in history. Its spectacular coastline and landscape are the stage for a rich culture proudly celebrated by the Cornish people. Legendary castles, famous places, and ancient ceremonies are just a few of the visits in our journey through this unique land. The Tamar Bridge is a symbolic gateway to Cornwall. Built in 1961, the road bridge links the city of Plymouth in Devon to the port of Saltash in Cornwall. Its older brother, the Prince Albert Railway Bridge, was built in 1859 by Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Throughout history, the Cornish have been an independent race, territorial of their land west of the Tamar. In 937 AD, the Saxon king, Athelstan, decreed, "The border of my country of England and the country of Cornwall shall forever be the eastern bank of the river Tamar." This decree has never been revoked. Sitting on a peninsula west of Plymouth Sound, Mount Edgecombe House majestically looks out across its landscaped gardens towards Devonport and Plymouth. This Tudor residence has been home to the Edgecombe family for over 400 years. The grounds cover 800 acres of the Rame Peninsula. Crafted during the 18th century, the landscape is dotted with follies, fountains and temples. The orangery is the focal point of 7 acres of formal gardens in which grows a huge variety of trees, exotic shrubs and flowers. The folly is typical of the 18th century fashion for elegant and eccentric seats in the landscape to impress friends and visitors. Further along the south coast of Cornwall, the busy fishing port of Looe sits either side of the river from which it takes its name. Fishermen cast their lines from the Banjo Pier at the river mouth, whilst further inland a bustling fishing industry thrives. A 7-arched bridge links east and west Looe, a town of colourful characters and quaint narrow streets. Paul Perrow's tales of rum and tobacco smuggling in centuries past add to the character of one of Cornwall's most beautiful fishing villages. Run by dedicated enthusiasts, the Bodmin and Wentford Steam Railway carries passengers through 4 miles of scenic countryside. The restored Great Western Railway Station at Bodmin is the terminus, with its collection of locomotives under restoration. The attractive village of Alternun is dominated by its 15th century church. Dedicated to St. Nona, it is described as the Cathedral of the Moors. A packhorse bridge spans a bubbling stream on its journey to the Tamar River. The inspiration for Daphne du Maurier's famous novel Jamaica Inn still retains the character and atmosphere of an 18th century inn, with reminders of its fabled customers and their fate. Despite its isolation in the centre of windswept Bodmin Moor, it remains an attraction for visitors from all over the world. On the eastern side of Bodmin Moor, 3 Bronze Age stone circles mark ancient and sacred places of ceremony and worship. Known as the hurlers, they are said to be men turned to stone as a penalty for playing the Cornish sport of hurling on the Sabbath. Despite its man-made appearance, the cheese ring is a natural rock formation sculpted by centuries of wind and weather erosion. Tretheavy Quoit is a Neolithic burial tomb consisting of upright granite slabs covered with a flat capstone, or quoit. Originally covered by an earth mound, it was probably used as a collective tomb before 2000 BC. At the village of St. Clair, the 15th century holy well is believed to have healing properties. The Norman castle at Helston overlooks what was Cornwall's capital until 1838. This proud old market town retains much of its Cornish character, despite its closeness to the Devon border. The castle itself dates back to the early years of the Norman conquest, constructed possibly as a result of the military expedition in 1067 by the forces of William the Conqueror. To the west of the town, the Helston Steam Railway winds its way through the scenic Kenzie Valley. Adjoining Helston Station is the British Engineering Exhibition, with vintage cars, motorcycles, working engines and locomotives under restoration. Once a busy port, the North Cornwall town of Bude traded sand and seaweed to the farms along the canal to Helston. On this occasion, it hosts the revived ancient ceremony of the Gorseth of the Bards of Curnow, or Cornwall. The main event is preceded by ethnic dancing and the traditional sport of Cornish wrestling. Then follows the gathering of Celtic poets, musicians, scholars and others whose services to Cornwall and the Celtic traditions have earned them the title of Bard of Gorseth Curnow. The fruits of the earth are offered by the Lady of Cornwall to the Grand Bard. There then follows the initiation of new bards. Now in the care of English heritage, the ancient ruins of Tintagel have fascinated travellers, writers and archaeologists alike by its history and legend. The fabled seat of King Arthur, Merlin and the Knights of the Round Table, the castle dates back to the 13th century, but earlier remains indicate a Roman signal post and a settlement during the Dark Ages. The relentless Atlantic Ocean has sculpted a coastline of rugged beauty and dramatic forms, which includes Merlin's Cave. In the village, this 14th century medieval manor house is known locally as the old post office. But in Tintagel, it is impossible to escape from the spirit of King Arthur. Built in 1933 by Frederick Thomas Glascott, the Great Hall of King Arthur is the seat of the Fellowship of the Knights of the Round Table.
Agreed his wife should be burned.
The legend is told to the visitor, who can see artifacts, manuscripts and other testaments to King Arthur in the Great Hall of Chivalry. Sheltering in the Camel Estuary, Padstow is a busy harbour town. Formerly a shipbuilding port, the Doon Bar sandbank across the estuary nowadays prevents passage of larger vessels. Legend has it that the sand is the curse of a mermaid who was shot at by a man as she was swimming. The attractive medieval town is a pleasure to visit at any time of the year, but the 1st of May heralds the great Padstow tradition of the Obios. This lively and colourful celebration is influenced by pagan fertility rites, history and legend. The May morning dance carries various processions of all ages around the streets of Padstow. The centre of each procession is the Black Oss, dancing tirelessly and led by a prancing teaser. The climax of the occasion is the dance of the red and the blue osses emerging from two separate places in the town. Celebrations of this unique event go on late into the night. This 14-arch bridge spans the River Camel, linking Wadebridge with Eglishale, the church on the estuary. Known as the Bridge on the Wool, tradition has it that wool packs were used in the 15th century foundations. This busy agricultural town pays host each June to the Royal Cornwall Show. Since 1793, this grand exhibition of livestock, agriculture, local and national trade and events has attracted many visitors. On this occasion, the 200th anniversary of the show, the guest of honour is Her Royal Highness Princess Anne, the Princess Royal. Pencarrow has been associated with the Molesworth St Albin family for 400 years. Built in the late 18th century, the house is set in a beautiful sunken Italian garden. Delightful walks wind their way through woodland, various conifers and curious features in the landscape. Lady Molesworth St Albin allows public access to the house, leading the way through a secret panel into the entrance hall. Paintings of family ancestry and their friends are framed in the pinewood panelling of this well-appointed room. The portraits continue in the splendid dining room. The exquisite features of many other rooms in the house can also be enjoyed. Completed in 1642, Lanhydrock House was given to the National Trust by the 7th Viscount Clifton in 1953. After a disastrous fire in 1881, much of the house was rebuilt in the late Victorian style we see today. The estate covers nearly 1,000 acres of grazing and woodland, accessed by a network of scenic pathways. Lanhydrock boasts 22 acres of formal Victorian gardens, which are a relaxing complement to the elegance within the house itself. A vintage taxi service runs to and from the main entrance. Perched on a hilltop site overlooking the Foy Valley, Restormel is one of Cornwall's finest examples of a Norman motte and bailey castle. Built in the 13th century, it was later captured and dismantled by the parliamentarian troops of Oliver Cromwell. Nevertheless, the detail of its layout is well preserved. One of Cornwall's most picturesque places, Foy overlooks a deep water anchorage used by ships large and small since the time of Henry VIII. The town's narrow streets make a delightful walk amongst Elizabethan and Edwardian architecture overlooking quaint shops and restaurants. A car and a passenger ferry weave their way between the craft to the small village and port of Polruan on the opposite bank. The 15th century Holy Trinity Church overlooks the heart of St Austell, a busy market town with modern precincts intertwined with old, narrow streets and alleyways. The famous market house, built in 1842, boasts splendid vaulted granite architecture. Inside is sheltered an attractive marketplace for visitors to browse through local craft and produce. However, its most stunning feature is the magnificent timber and slate roof construction, the largest unsupported wooden span in Europe. North of St Austell, mountainous heaps of clay and sand give the appearance of a lunar landscape, a byproduct of the China clay industry. The museum at Wheal preserves the history of its manufacture over the last 2 centuries. Around the grounds are working machines of the industry's past. Further afield, a beautiful nature trail winds its way through rhododendrons, spectacular views, and scenic woodland. A walk up to the viewing point reveals a modern working clay pit. Inside the museum, a display of the processes and products of China clay can be seen. The malt room on top of the famous St Austell brewery is the beginning of a traditional brewing process dating back 140 years. Visitors follow the fascinating skills and methods of brewing on a short film before a guided tour of the working brewery. Every stage of the process is an illuminating experience, from the clatter of bottling to the unique taste and smell of brewer's yeast. The resident brewery cooper is one of the last of his kind to supply discerning pubs with wooden casks to contain their brew. Visitors enjoy and admire his display of rare and traditional skills. Finally, the fruit of these labours are displayed and tasted with colourful names such as Wrecker's Bitter, Tinner's Ale, and a host of others. Built into a 60-foot pinnacle of granite, Roach Rock, a 15th century chapel and hermitage dedicated to St Michael, looks out across the clay landscape. St Gonund, a leper, is said to have lived there, tended by his daughter Gundred, who fetched water from a well nearby. Formerly known as Porthilly, the famous fishing village of Mevagissey acquired its present name in the late 15th century from the Welsh and Irish saints Meva and Aoife. The great shoals of pilchards, from which Mevagissey prospered in centuries past, have been largely replaced by visitors to its picturesque harbour, quaint fishing boats, and pastel-painted cob cottages. The town itself retains its character and history, with its narrow streets, bright flowery courtyards, and leaning buildings of Cornish stone. The picturesque, tranquil village of Veryan is best known for its 19th century thatched round houses. Their shape stems from the superstition that the devil likes to hide and lie in wait in corners. A nearby gallery displays an attractive collection of paintings and prints, many by local Cornish artists. FISTRAL Beach is one of the numerous attractions making Newquay Cornwall's largest holiday resort. In addition to its sandy beaches, the headland embraces an excellent golf course. The town itself is a busy mecca for shoppers and offers a variety of restaurants, bars and nightclubs. Until the end of the 19th century, Old Newquay thrived on pilchard fishing. In centuries past, the hewer's hut was a vantage point from which shoals of pilchards could be seen and their presence signalled by the hewer to the waiting boats below. Each summer, FISTRAL Beach hosts surfing championships, an international competition attracting surfers and spectators alike. Newquay's TRENANCE gardens are a colourful and vivid display of flower beds, shrubs and well-kept lawns, complemented by an attractive boating lake. The old Albion Inn at Crantock has a secret chamber under its stone floor, once used by smugglers. The Gannel estuary separates this quiet, ancient village from the bustle of Newquay. The narrow-gauge steam engine Zebedee waits at Benny Holt platform to take you on a 2-mile trip through beautiful countryside. Running on one of the oldest reclaimed track beds in Cornwall, the little engine arrives at its destination at East Wheal Rose. There are hours of fun against the historic backdrop of East Wheal Rose engine house before the return journey to Benny Holt. The inviting sands of Chapel Porth entice you down between the high green cliffs south of St Agnes Head. The landscape is dotted with stark reminders of Cornwall's tin mining past. Accessed by a network of scenic footpaths, Wilcote's engine house perches dramatically on the cliffside, looking out across the Atlantic from a headland bright with flowery heathers. The 3 spires of the late 19th century cathedral reach high above Trero's busy streets. Now a centre of business and social life, Cornwall's capital city has much evidence of its Victorian and Georgian heritage, although its history dates back to the Middle Ages. A memorial to the Cornish explorer Richard Lander overlooks the well-preserved Georgian terraces of Lemon Street. Victoria Gardens in the centre of the city were opened in 1898 to commemorate the 60th year of the reign of that queen. The rivers Trero and Tresillian merge at Malpas into the River Fowl, flowing eventually to the port of Falmouth and out into the English Channel. It's a quiet and attractive area of marine recreation and wildlife. On the edge of the capital city lies the ancient and picturesque church of St Clement's. Leaving Trero, Penpal is an idyllic village en route to the King Harry Ferry, which crosses the River Fowl by hauling itself along 2 submerged chains stretched between the banks. Set in a lovely hollow of subtropical trees and shrubs, the 13th century St Justin Roseland Church looks out across a wooded tidal creek. Legend has it that Christ, as a boy, was brought to this area by his rich uncle Joseph of Arimathea, who was a merchant, no doubt seeking tin. A popular yachting haven, St Mawes. This is an attractive hillside cluster of charming cottages and steep, narrow lanes. St Mawes Castle was one of 2, the other being Pendennis at Falmouth, built by Henry VIII in 1542. The fort was easily captured from its landward side in the Civil War because all its guns faced seaward. Flourishing on a private hillside, LAMORRAN house gardens cover 5 acres. Protected from winter frost by the mild climate of St. Mawes, the Mediterranean-style terraces of tropical flowers, shrubs and cacti blend with ornaments and follies of Cornish stone to create the perfect retreat. Before Tudor times, Falmouth was a small fishing village called Penicumquig. Then, its potential as a large deep-water port caused its rapid development in the late 16th century by Sir Walter Raleigh and the local piratical Killigrew family. Their manor house, Arwenack, overlooks the harbour. Falmouth's busy customs officers had their own special method for the disposal of contraband tobacco. Nearby, a memorial stands to the men of the packet ship service, sailing from Falmouth for over 200 years until 1852. Behind the main street of this attractive town centre is a thoroughfare known as Jacob's Ladder, a steep flight of 111 stone steps. A close neighbour to Falmouth is Penryn, an ancient port with an impressive high street of Georgian, Tudor and Jacobean buildings. These delightful terraces vary in character, being slate-hung, painted or built of the local granite. In medieval times, the town was the controlling port for commercial shipping. This continued for many years until the development of the more accessible Falmouth at the mouth of the river. A memorial to the fabulously wealthy local mine owner Francis Bassett looks out over Redruth from the bracken-covered hill of Carnbray. The legendary Cornish giant Bolster is said to have stood with 1 foot on Carnbray and the other on St. Agnes Beacon, 6 miles away. The rock-studded hillside is a protected archaeological site with evidence of Neolithic settlement. Originally a 14th century hunting lodge of the Bassett family, the castle, now a restaurant, sits on the 738-foot summit. Helston, with its Saxon origins, is an ancient borough and stannery town, where local tin was valued and stamped in the Coinage Hall, giving the name to Coinage Hall Street. Foliage is being attached to doorways and windows in preparation for Helston's most famous day. On the 8th of May, the morning bells of St. Michael's Church herald the Helston Ferry dance. Thousands arrive each year to join the celebration of the triumph of life in spring over the death of winter in this age-old pagan pageant. Procession weaves its way around the streets and in and out of the houses, the shops and public buildings. Lismore Gardens is a beautiful private residence visited by the public and the dancers as they move through the town. The dignified appearance of gentlemen in top hats and morning suits and the charming dresses of their partners mark the formalized midday dance. Flambard Village Theme Park, just outside Helston, is an active and educational family attraction. There are a variety of exciting indoor and outdoor rides set among award-winning gardens. Since its creation in 1976, the former Cornwall Aero Park has expanded to include an authentic Victorian village of over 50 shops, trade premises and interiors. The famous apothecary of William White has been meticulously reassembled at Flambards. Britain in the Blitz is a nostalgic step back to life in wartime Britain. Modern-day exhibits are equally fascinating, including adventures in science at the Exploratorium. The 18th century mining heritage of the parish of Wendron is recreated at POLDARK mine. Visitors can explore the restored workings of this once busy tin mine by way of a guided tour and the essential hard hat. The underground journey is through a labyrinth of shafts, stopes and chambers, part of a system totaling 3 miles. POLDARK's postbox is the deepest in Britain and has its own postmark, whilst the tin itself can be seen in the rock. Back on the surface there is a museum, restaurant, amusements and a heritage collection recreating 18th century mining life, plus a collection of working engines. Monan Smith, as its name implies, takes its name from a smithy dating from 1645. Typical of many village pubs in Cornwall, the Red Lion Inn is one of its oldest buildings and is a delightful example of Cornish history and hospitality in the most pleasant of settings. TREBAH Garden extends 600 metres down to its own private beach on the Helford River. Headed at the top of the valley by TREBAH House, 25 acres of steeply wooded ravine embrace a subtropical paradise of trees, flowers and shrubs, which can be reached by a labyrinth of footpaths. Growing up to 15 feet in height, Brazilian rhubarb spreads its 8-foot leaves. From TREBAH House, one can view much of the 100 years of dedicated creation as it slopes down to the beach below. Near the house, many of TREBAH's plants can be purchased. In a peaceful, wooded tidal creek nestles the small village of Helford, a picturesque cluster of pastel cottages and thatched roofs. Nearby, the Shipwright's Arms looks out over the widening creek as it joins the Helford River. West of Helford, Frenchman's Creek is a densely wooded tidal inlet, its trees reaching down to the water's edge. It takes its name from Daphne du Maurier's famous novel, inspiring her to write of this place as the hideaway for the French smuggler and his boat La Moette. Near the village of St Keverne, on the Lizard Peninsula, is the small working farm of Tregellis Barton. Like generations before him, Joe Roskilly and his family are local people. Between them, they manage the farm's many activities, including a dairy herd of 95 Channel Island cows. Grazing on sweet grass from organic pastures, the rich natural milk then produced is the vital ingredient for the Cornish clotted cream, for which Roskillies are famous. The quality cream is also essential for the wide range of specialty ice creams. The cream in the delicious dairy fudge is one of many ingredients which are a family secret. Jams, chutneys, mustards and honey are also produced and sold at the small farm shop. Visitors can also enjoy 20 acres of meadows, ponds, orchards and Cornish hedgerow, an award-winning and beautiful area of conservation. A delightful cluster of whitewashed cottages, Cadgwith thatched roofs are held down from winter gales with heavy chains. A footpath winds its way between the houses to the steep shingle beach, once the scene of a record pilchard catch in the 19th century. Close by the sheltered beach is the renowned hostelry where the Cadgwith singers regularly meet in deep harmony. Just south of Cadgwith is Llandoadnick Church, nestling in the lovely seclusion of Church Cove. And just around the corner is the most southerly part of the British mainland, Lizard Point. Spectacular Atlantic views from serpentine cliffs are fragrant with sea thrift and scented thyme. This beautiful coastline has claimed many ships with its turbulent waters and prevailing winds, despite the Lizard Lighthouse, which has stood guardian for nearly 400 years. Originally built in 1620 by Sir John Killigrew, it shed its light from open coal fires. Today, its powerful light can be seen 64 miles away on a clear night. The Cornwall coast path heads northwest from Lizard to Kynance along a dramatic coastline of towering serpentine rock forms and secluded coves. Further along the coast, Mullion Cove nestles between high cliffs and heathland, bright with orange lichens and sea lavender. The outstretched granite arms of Mullion Harbour preserve this tiny harbour with its old net store, fish cellar and winch house. North of the Lizard, the skyline of Goonhilly Downs are dominated by the unearthly forms of British Telecom's satellite Earth station. Opened in 1962, it was one of the first 3 Earth stations in the world. Nowadays, 7 major dishes with diameters from 13 up to a massive 32 meters send and receive phone calls, TV programs and computer messages by microwaves bounced off orbiting satellites 22,300 miles above. After a tour by bus, the visitor centre offers science exhibits, video shows and souvenirs of a visit simply out of this world. Porthleven is an attractive boat building and fishing port. It flourished at the beginning of the 19th century as an exporter of tin and copper. Later, the Victorians built an inner harbour with doors to seal it off from the fierce southwesterly gales. Today, its tranquil atmosphere and open layout make it a pleasure to visit. The blue Atlantic swell runs along the outstretched arm of the harbour wall, which divides the port entrance from a long, steeply shelved beach. In the centre of a harvested field, the neck of uncut corn is the focus of a gathering of old Cornwall societies and other followers of Cornish culture. Singing, speeches and prayers in English and Cornish precede the main ceremony.
I can tear my hollow dusk gorzine, cut blood and all.
The neck of corn is cut, capturing the spirit of growth, which fled to it during the main harvest. Made into corn dollies, these are burnt the following year, transferring their spirit of growth to the new corn.
Morgan! 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 Finders! Finders!
The ancient borough of St Ives was once a major centre for pilchard fishing. Its beautiful harbour and array of golden beaches.
What is it?
Porthmere, on the north coast, is a blue. Wander along the sunlit cobbles of the wharf. The town's narrow streets and picturesque cottages all have a special character of their own. The Tate Gallery at St Ives, overlooking Porthmere Beach, is a symbol of the town's artistic connections, from Turner's visit in the 1880s to the modern influence during the 20th century, with artists such as Ben Nicholson, Peter Lanyon and sculptress Barbara Hepworth. The fairy tale island castle of St Michael's Mount rises majestically from the seas of Mounts Bay. A place of pilgrimage since the Middle Ages, the cobbled causeway is the low-tide route for 500,000 visitors a year. Benedictine monks from Mont Saint-Michel in Brittany founded the priory in 1135. During the dissolution of the monasteries in 1535, Henry VIII requisitioned the mount as a fortress, its stunning position a distinct military advantage. Today, the mount and the castle are in the care of the National Trust. The beautiful beach at Marzion facing the mount is the home of the Mounts Bay Sailing Club and many national and international sailing competitions. Marzion was an ancient civic centre and market for the area. Its unusual name is derived from the Cornish words Margas Vian, meaning little market. Penzance is a colourful and historic town thriving in the mild climate and sheltered position of Mounts Bay. It derives its name from the Cornish Pen Sands, holy headland. At its centre, Market Jew Street is a bustling thoroughfare of shops and businesses. Its name is an English distortion of the Cornish Margas Yow, meaning Thursday Market. From the promenade are distant views of St Michael's Mount and the open sea. The Admiral Benbow Inn is one of Chapel Street's many interesting 18th and 19th century buildings. Now in the care of the Landmark Trust, the unusual and colourful facade of the Egyptian house started life as 2 cottages in 1834. Opposite, in the Union Hotel grounds, is the second oldest theatre building in the country. The hotel assembly room hosted the announcement from this balcony of Nelson's victory and death at the Battle of Trafalgar. The enchanting fishing village of Mousehole is a perfect example of Cornish atmosphere and beauty. Built from traditional granite, the sheltered harbour embraces a bright flotilla of fishing vessels and local craft. The village is a cluster of quaint hillside cottages intertwined with narrow lanes and passageways. In 1595, the Spanish raided Mousehole, burning it to the ground, apart from one building, the manor house. Later, this became the Kegwin Arms Inn and is now a private dwelling. The beautiful cove at LAMORRAN nestles in a deep combe with a small group of cottages and a pier of locally quarried granite. About a mile from LAMORRAN, the Merry Maidens are a Bronze Age circle of 19 granite stones. These are said to be the petrified figures of young girls punished for dancing on the Sabbath. Set amongst bright, flowery headlands and a sapphire blue sea are the golden sands of Howard Curnow, beneath towering granite cliffs. From the nearby hamlet of Treen, a glorious coastal walk reveals the dramatic coastline of Howard Curnow Bay, leading to Logan Rock, a 65-ton boulder capable of being rocked. The Minnick Open Air Theatre was created on the steep cliffside by Miss Rowena Cade in 1923. Summertime performances by professional companies are uniquely different against such a natural and dramatic backdrop. Also built into the rock and overlooking the restless Atlantic are the restored Crown's engine houses at Metallic, with their mine shafts sloping down and outwards under the seabed. Reminders of Cornwall's mining past are dotted all around this coastline of beautiful heathers, flowers and dramatic views. Restored by dedicated volunteers of the TREBAH Society, Levant is the oldest steam engine in Cornwall. Lord Falmouth's presentation marks its official reopening under steam in 1993. The great beams and wheels in motion once more, turning the winches which hoisted the tin ore from 278 fathoms below.
The same drum. Yeah, I think so.
Sennan Cove and the inviting beach of Whitesand Bay are the most westerly in Cornwall. Neighbouring Gwenver Beach is one of the finest for surfing in the whole country. And finally, the Longship's Lighthouse and the vast blue expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. 25 miles beyond Land's End are the enchanting Isles of Scilly. Complementing the natural beauty of this popular place, the Land's End experience is a rewarding family visit. There are presentations and exhibitions of maritime history, geology and wildlife. There is also a first-class hotel and restaurant. This is a poignant moment to reflect on a memorable visit to Cornwall, our land of beauty, myth and legend.